Thank you so much, Dean Rehbein, for being with us today on this episode of Dauntless Leadership. We really work hard to empower emerging leaders and talk about subjects that will help people do a better job leading in work, in life, and in general. So happy to have you with us here today.
Thanks. I'm really happy to be here.
Can we start with your saying your current role and how to find you or Douglas Residential College?
Sure. So my name is Meghan Rehbein. I'm currently the Dean of Douglas Residential College, which is the women's college at Rutgers University in New Jersey. And our website is a great way to connect with us. We're active on LinkedIn and on Instagram, and I can be reached at Douglas_Dean@rutgers.edu. We really love connecting, and in particular, LinkedIn and Instagram, there's some really great opportunities for community members to connect with our students that we'll post often, but just keeping an eye on what's happening and what's going on.
Excellent. And we'll post that so people will be able to see it. And as a person who is very interested in helping Douglas students, I encourage you to join and to see where we can make a difference. And I'll start with my first question for all guests, which is, what does Dauntless mean to you?
I think for me, the idea of being dauntless is about resilience. It's that way of being that lets you keep going in the face of serious challenges, or keeps you motivated when you face barriers that seem insurmountable. I think there's courage in it and a little bit of ability, but deep down, it really is that sense of resilience. I think about, a knight in shining armor kind of thing. Just keep going.
And just keep going is a really good message, because there are going to be times, maybe even right now, where you could get discouraged, disappointed in what's happening around us in the world, what's happening in your career or your current education. But keeping going means you're going to get better. And we'll talk a little bit about that today. But speaking of journeys, talk a little bit about your career journey, if you would.
My unconventional, I started with an unconventional undergraduate experience. So, when I graduated from college, I had no idea what I wanted to do long term. I thought originally maybe I'd go back for a PhD in anthropology and eventually teach in a university setting, but I really didn't know. So I took a part-time temporary job as a summer volunteer coordinator for a local Habitat for Humanity affiliate. I loved the work. Absolutely loved the work. I loved the organization. I loved the people I met, and I loved the way it felt to go to work every day and make a difference. So I stuck it out. I did go back to graduate school. I went and got a master's, but not in anthropology. But went back and got a master's, but at the same time, I stayed working with that Habitat for Humanity affiliate, and I took a full-time role in fundraising with the organization, which developed into a 25-year career in nonprofit management. And that's actually how I ended up at Douglas and Rutgers. So I joined more than 6 years ago in an advancement role. So I was raising funds and engaging alumni on behalf of Douglas. In March of 2020, I shifted into a chief of staff role. The world was changing around us. There was a need for someone to kind of step in and work through those operational pieces that really needed to be addressed for Douglas. And so I spent a couple years supporting the former dean. And then when she left her role as dean, I stepped in about 18 months ago. So I've been Dean of Douglas since July of 2022.
Awesome.
It's the best job I've ever had. It's really an amazing, amazing thing to come to work every day and do this.
Well, I might entitle this episode, Go to Work and Make a Difference Every Day. I know that you feel that way about your job. So I'm going to ask you two questions coming out of what you just said. First, what is so special about your current role? And second, like you, I also did not know what I wanted to study or what I wanted to be when I grow up. And my mom used to say, you don't have to know what you want to be when you grow up, just what you want to do next. And I'd
Yes.
love to know if you
Yes.
agree with that. And
100%.
yeah, yeah. Because I mean, there's lots of women I really admire that had no idea what they were going to do or what they even wanted to study. And I think students at Rutgers, my students often don't know. They're in business because their parents told them to go there
Yeah.
versus
Yeah. I mean,
that's what they want.
I try to encourage students to recognize that the decisions they're making now are not forever. That they can try something and see if they like it. And if they don't, they can do something different. But you're right, they come in feeling like everything, whether they take this class or that class next semester, is going to be the decision that means
Yeah.
they're not going to have a job when they graduate. I mean, it's so really trying to help them understand that they're not dooming themselves for the rest of their lives if they decide to try something. I mean,
Not
we try,
only not dooming themselves, but maybe opening up, if you hadn't been
right,
at Habitat for
right,
Humanity, it
right.
opened up your whole career path.
Yep. And I never would have thought of fundraising. Number one, I never would have thought of fundraising as a career because I didn't know anybody who did that work. And number two, I never would have thought I'd be good at it. There's this perception out there that in order to be a good fundraiser, you have to be an extrovert, you have to be, bubbly, and you have to be energized by talking with people. And I am an introvert. I mean, I have some extroverted qualities, but primarily I recharge by kind of pulling in rather than expanding out. And it never would have occurred to me that those characteristics, those qualities would actually make me a better fundraiser. Because really, a lot of fundraising is about listening, and extroverts sometimes talk more than they listen. Introverts often listen more than they talk. But it was not a career I was thinking about at all. And also, I think, you know, people don't go into one career anymore. They
Yeah.
don't take a job and keep it for 30 years. They don't go into a career and stay in that field for 30 years usually. So, you're looking at a career that's going to look like a roller coaster, not an escalator. You got to be able to relax and make some game time decisions.
I mean, I think that's so true now. I might change the title to roller coaster, not escalator. But I am 61 years old and I'm probably going to be making a career change. To what? I don't know. And this will be like my fourth.
Yeah,
I think that's right. And I think
yeah,
that not only using the language of opportunity, but also try it,
yeah,
keep it on and try something new. I'm going to go
yeah.
back to, I met you when you were in the advancement role,
Right.
probably 6 years ago. You were pretty new.
I was very new.
Yeah. And I knew then you were a great listener. And I think that skill set, and especially interesting to me that you don't identify yourself as an extrovert. It's really important in fundraising, but also in sales and business development. I find that the best people and client service
Yeah,
to serve in those roles are great listeners. And so women should not be afraid if they don't think they're extroverted.
yeah, yeah. I draw on as a child and I guess young adult. Um, I did a lot of community theater,
Hmm.
and I draw on that training. So networking has always been very difficult for me because networking requires you to put yourself out there, talk to people you don't know, open up conversations. That the cold calls, the cold introductions are hard sometimes. So I draw on that early theater training. I put on a role. Who am I when I go into this room today? It's something we try to teach students, particularly really shy students. I talk a lot with our associate dean for women in science and engineering, who will say many of the STEM students who come through Douglas are very shy, introverted, a lot more focused on their academic work than on building social relationships. And so one of the things we try to teach them is how important it is to have those social relationships around the work that you're doing. So find ways to build social and friend relationships with students who are in the same boat as you. That's why our living learning communities for engineers, computer scientists, pharmacy and nursing students, and pre-med students are so important. And find ways to be comfortable talking to people that you don't know, because you have to do it. Even if you end up working in a lab,
Yeah.
you still have to talk to people you don't know. That's what work is.
Well, I mean, we are working on development of a medical device with engineers and scientists, and the only way it's going to get funded and advanced is
Yes.
their cross-functional relationships and partnerships. So as good as they are scientifically or as
Yeah.
engineers, they have to be equally good collaborators and communicators. And
Yeah.
so that's one thing I really love about Douglas is that you do focus on that as well. And I think probably a lot of academic institutions should focus
Yeah.
a bit more. And I think it's a lost art as
Yeah.
people have. I just read an article about people having to learn how to date in real life
Yeah.
because they only know how to date online and they don't know how to make eye contact and have a conversation. So your idea of what's my role and what am I going to say, that matters in dating as well as work.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I I didn't get back to, so you said you love your job. Tell me
I do.
what you love about your job.
I do. I think I mean, it's exciting. It's a little daunting, but I think it is an exciting time to be leading an organization, particularly in higher education. Um, Higher education is changing and will, particularly as we think about what our role is in a world where AI and generative AI is becoming a much more prevalent part of a much more prevalent tool in the workforce. Um, Douglas is growing right now. We're growing both partnerships within Rutgers and with outside organizations to address some of the needs we see and hear from our students, a lot around mental health, holistic wellness, career prep, but also hands-on experiential learning, because that is how this generation learns. I'm in a unique position as dean. I'm the linchpin for all of this. I see all of these connections. I'm blessed with an amazing team that makes it actually work. They are doing really good work, often in the face of significant challenges on the national scale. But we're really thinking about what the next few years will look like for women's education, for women in leadership, and working to position Douglas and Rutgers as one of the leading national voices in that conversation.
I mean, I know because I've read your mission and actually had the pleasure of working on the website that you say, we believe that every good future must include well-educated students with the confidence to speak up and the curiosity to listen, with the analytical will to test hypotheses and the creative drive to invent something new. And again, courage and resilience. I know that you're always thinking about this. Is this what you're seeing that needs to be part of women's leadership and women's education in the future? And how are you instilling some of these qualities?
I mean, I think it's important for every student, regardless of gender identity. I think that these kinds of things are so critically important, um, particularly in a society that's becoming more and more divided along serious fault lines. So for us, it starts with Knowledge and Power, which is our mission course. So every Douglas student takes this course. It's a little bit intro to women's studies, a little bit connecting Douglas history and mission, and a little bit encouraging students to engage with kind of the programs, clubs, activities, and opportunities that are available at Douglas and Rutgers. But what we are doing is really teaching students how to build a sense of community in that class. There's community in the classroom, It's a small class, and for many first year students, it's the smallest class they will have. You know, they don't necessarily have small classes if they're taking intro to political science or intro to biology. Um, so there's the community in the class, there's their found community. So who is your community at a place like Rutgers that is big, and you need to find ways to make it small? This generation of students, particularly students who were in middle school or high school during COVID, may not have those community building skills outside of a virtual environment. And so part of what we're doing is teaching them how to do it here with us. And then once they've taken knowledge and power, the second thing we do that's really important is encourage them to start exploring perspectives that are different from their own, right? So figuring out what their own perspective is, what is their voice, and then reaching out to people who have different voices, who have different experiences, who have different perspectives, and learning how to engage productively. So we have a couple ways we do that. One is our community catalysts. So these are students that are trained to provide these kinds of training services to other students. We have a dialogue across different series that brings students from two opposite perspectives together to learn how to dialogue productively. Or, you know, we encourage students to think about global perspectives, you know, whether that's health and medicine around the world, or sustainability and gender, or, you know, the impact of migration. It both from the perspective of academic work, but also community engagement work. So who are the organizations in the New Brunswick area that are working on these problems, and how do you connect with them? You know, how do you make a difference beyond what you learn in class? And those two pieces, knowledge and power, the mission course, and then this perspective taking process are the key ways that we are really inspiring that sense of curiosity, confidence, and resilience.
I feel like that should be a foundational course for every student at Rutgers, and teaching students today how to build community and understand others' perspectives in a very divisive time is incredibly important. Any words of wisdom there? I think that anybody listening would want to know how to do a better job at hearing somebody else's perspective that you don't agree with.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. It's something I think I work on every day. Um, Rutgers is really stepping up there, and there's programming across Douglas's programming is part of it, but there's programming across the university that is really driving this civil discourse and civic engagement message home. That, you know, number one, you have to be able to talk with people who feel differently than you do. And the president actually runs what's called a Burn seminar, which is a first year seminar where he invites people who have different opinions from him to engage with him in front of the class. So modeling that behavior is important as faculty and staff. But then giving students an opportunity to practice it too. And giving faculty and staff an opportunity to practice it. Elizabeth Maddow, who is the executive director of the Eagleton Institute for Politics, is leading a civil dialogue and civic engagement effort at Rutgers. And Douglas is thrilled to be partnering with her and with Eagleton on that, because it is, I think, the most critical challenge facing us in the US right now. This idea that we cannot come to a place where we can respectfully engage with people who feel differently than we do. We need
I
to be able
feel
to
that.
do that. We do. Our democracy, our civil society depends on it.
Are there differences between men and women, and you know, at really thinking about how people identify, and learning confidence, resilience, how to build a community? And if so, what should we be thinking about to make sure that we're developing these skills And then secondly, what advice would you give to young leaders on how they can be their best and what's hard about focusing on success that they should be considering?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I think 5 years ago, I would have answered your first question very differently. And one of the things I've learned from working with the students here at Douglas is that this generation of students has a far more expansive understanding of gender. And they really are not looking at the world through a male-female binary. And so one of the challenges we're facing is how do we think about women's experiences, women's issues, women's leadership in a world that isn't necessarily binary. It's not a question I have a good answer for yet, but it really does challenge some of the traditional ideas about women's leadership qualities, right? There's all sorts of research about, does women's leadership look different from men's leadership? And I would say it's pretty equally divided. Some people say yes, empathy, leading with empathy. Women leaders are much more likely to lead with empathy, much more likely to prioritize relationships over hierarchies. But I also think that we can fall into traps as women who are leading, because then when you are expressing some of these qualities that are more likely to be considered male leadership qualities, like being authoritative in a meeting, making a decision and saying, I'm deciding it, this is it, that you get challenged because you're not necessarily leading with empathy in that case. But there are times where you have to make those decisions as a leader. You have to say, no, I'm drawing the line, we're done. For students, when they're challenging this idea that there's a male-female binary overall, and then you kind of extrapolate to thinking about leadership qualities, it lets you be a little bit more expansive and say there is this huge range of what it means to be a leader, of the skills and qualities. And you can be flexible. You can pick. Sometimes these work in this situation, sometimes those work better in that situation. And I think one of the things that it's important to teach women who are moving into leadership roles is how to be flexible that way, how to use different skills, different types of leadership in different situations. And so maybe that's the thing that I think really is kind of my best advice for women looking to become or to jump into leadership roles. Figure out how to be a chameleon in your leadership identity.
What didn't I ask you that I should have?
Oh, let's see. Well, so one of the things that I was thinking about was advice and, good advice. So I don't know that there's one piece of advice that I could say was the best advice that I've ever been given, but I have a very good friend who works in nonprofit leadership. We worked together decades ago. We stayed in touch and we talk many mornings on our drive-in. We both have a drive-in to work. We will call each other and just talk about what's going on in our lives, and particularly what's going on at work. So there's no one thing that she has said to me over the years that's the best advice, but I lean on her for advice and guidance so often. I think having a trusted person that you can be real with, that understands the challenges that you're facing, that has been key for me. Because I can bounce things off of her in a completely risk-free environment. She doesn't work with me, so there's no issues with me saying, oh, I'm having this problem at work, like help me talk through it and understand. But it has been so critical for some of the really tough decisions and tough situations that I found myself in over the years, to have that trusted person. I think that's another thing I encourage students to do. Find somebody that you really can talk to about what's going on in your life.
I feel like I was lucky to have my mom for many years, who was in nonprofit. She ran the New York Organ Donor Network, Donor Family
Wow.
Services, nothing to do with what I do, but plenty of challenges that I could ask her anything, and she always gave me her point of view.
Yeah.
And same going back the other way with my not being shy to give mine. And it was just nice to have a safe zone. And I miss that, actually. I lost my
Yeah.
mom, and
Yeah.
and I think everybody should have that in their lives. And is there I certainly Douglas fosters those kind of relationships, but in a big college environment or a big company environment, what I always tell people is try to get up your courage to just ask somebody that has said something that resonates with you,
Yes.
or that feels like they could be a good role model or mentor for you. And for me, that's great advice for me. So much so that I started this podcast because there are so many people from whom I want to learn. And I'm just asking, would you
Yeah.
spend 20 minutes with me online and answer some questions? And as I said, I've been so fortunate that many wonderful people like you have said yes, that I will fill a calendar and
Yeah.
I'll still have questions. And you'd be surprised how often people are likely to say yes if you ask,
Yeah.
but you got to
Yeah.
ask, right?
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
that's great advice.
Yeah.
Great advice.
For students, it's, who echoes your questions in class? Talk to them.
Yeah.
Who do you find yourself nodding along with when they're speaking in class? Talk to them. And again, for this generation of students, because they have spent so much of their life online, um, that is a critical skill. That's one of the skills that they will take with them wherever they go for the rest of their life.
So that's a good way to leave, I think, today, to talk about how important it is to listen to the people around you, find those that inspire you, and strike up a relationship. Maybe that will be your person, your trusted person as your journey continues. And I can't thank you enough for being here with me today.
Thank you. This was a fabulous conversation, Lisa. I appreciate the opportunity.